Anyway, hello everyone. This is episode 92 of the Three Body Problem on Friday, April 3rd. It's a Good Friday on an Easter weekend. Saying hello to my friends, the buddies Jags and Costin Raiu. Is Easter a big thing in Romania, Costin?
True, super big, but it's not this week, it's next week for us.
Oh fuck, let me restart
Because
the podcast.
You guys can
because these guys
just fucking change it? What the
they
fuck?
can't agree, man. Because they can't agree on like calendars, time zones. We can't agree on anything basically, not even languages. And because of that, our Easter is next week.
Oh, your Easter is next week. How is life out in Romania this week?
Yeah, it's okay. It was raining all week long, and I've been super busy with the case, doing an incident response, so writing reports, going through logs.
Is this a supply chain thing or?
And it's just I think like good old ransomware case where there's everything you might dream about, like Fortinet vulnerabilities, stealers, leaked credentials, all of that mixed. They just result in ransomware, and the chance of decryption is always very little, but we're hopeful.
So when you're doing this incident response things, that's the goal, to find some sort of decryption key or try to reverse it.
Well, ideally, sure, yeah. Well, I have like generally three goals in mind. One is to find out how they did it, how did they manage to break in. And this is maybe the easiest, because if you have a little bit of logs and you mix together logs from different sources, even if you don't have NetFlow and things like that, if you just rely on Windows logs or like Linux logs, you can still figure out kind of how they got in. And once they
That's
got
an
in,
important goal, so you can just like at least figure out what if there's
For
a patch to
me-
patch and get things moving.
for me, it's the most important, because then I can recommend the customer what to do, not to get owned in the future. So if I know how they got in, which is typically like one of these VPN appliances that didn't have patches, the usual, like honestly speaking, all three cases that we've done recently, all of them started with a Fortinet compromise. All three of them. Like
Big company,
Fortinet,
small company?
some big, some small. They all started with Fortinet routers running firmware 6, like FortiOS version 6, which is from 2021, 2022.
Full of
And,
unpatched stuff.
So at least three vulnerabilities that can be chained together to get access to the device. And then the good old issue that Fortinet stores all the passwords in plain text, like they haven't heard about hashing, so they encrypt the passwords with the predefined string. Mary had a
That's
little lamb.
fixed in new ones though, right?
Only
But
if
not
you manually
enabled. I
enable
think
it.
we had this
Only-
conversation, right?
Correct. Only if you manually enable. But nevertheless, these were older 6 firmware, like FortiGate Series 160. So they don't even get patches. Some of these models, they don't get patches anymore. So they're like dead on those versions.
So that's the first goal, and you said that's more likely the easier part. What are the other two major goals in these responses?
Well, the first one is how they got in, right? I think number two for us, when we look at these cases, is to understand what they did in the network. Did they plant backdoors? Like typically what they do, they exfiltrate data, at least ransomware groups, but also
First
APTs.
thing, right? There's like
Yeah.
a time window there where they're just scrambling to.
So like in most of them, first they try to increase their access, so to get more access, to pivot through the network, escalate privileges, mimikats, things like that. For me, it's important to understand exactly what they did in the network, so I can make sure that I can close all the gaps during the cleanup. And I know I've seen so many cases when the attackers, they just leave some kind of a tiny backdoor somewhere, like a totally different tool from everything else they used initially to compromise that company. And then they leave like a cron job using curl or things like that, or a .NET backdoor when they only use, let's say, a Golang tools. So that one can be a bit tricky to find. So yeah, the second goal would be to understand what they did in the network, everything they did, and of course how much information was stolen, which is usually a very hard task, because if you don't have logs, then it's hard to understand what was taken. If you have network logs, at least you get an idea of the volume, so you understand like, okay, we saw an exfiltration of 300 gigs, or we saw 3 terabytes, or I don't know, 5 petabytes, like in some recent cases, public cases, not the ones that we worked on. So that's, I guess, the second goal. And the third one is to try to recover the data. Now,
and this is where you're scrambling for decryption key is still like the big thing.
So you look for either vulnerabilities in the encryption used by the cryptors deployed by the ransomware groups. So in some cases, there are vulnerabilities, that's for sure. And there's been some really interesting cases that Gen Digital wrote about recently, where somebody took the logbit source codes and they re-implemented the encryption, but they did a mistake, and as a result, the encryption key was crackable. So in some cases, that happens.
That's in tiny cases, right?
Very rarely. Okay. Very rarely, but I've seen it happen at least 3 times in my life. I think 2 times when we were at our previous job, and 1 more recently.
And back in the old days, we used to we made a lot of PR around the availability of these decryption keys that we were able to crack, right? I mean, that was a kind of a thing.
Sure, it makes people very happy. And the other thing is that sometimes law enforcement, and we work with law enforcement, we reach out to law enforcement, and with customers' permission, we share reports of our discoveries. Because we hope maybe law enforcement can get hold of the decryption keys, the master decryption keys, and then we can build a decryptor that we can use, to help the customers. And this has happened several times before, actually quite a few times. Or in some cases, the ransomware guys, they just get scared and they leak, they publish all the encryption keys and they retire. By retire, that means they rebrand. Right. And with the decryption keys, you can try again to decrypt the data. So those are the 3 steps. And sometimes there's one of the step which I call 3.5 maybe. And that is to find out who was behind the attack, not just which ransomware group or which team using ransomware tools, but the identity of the people at the keyboard. And I've seen this happen a couple of times. I think we had some kind of a success in the most recent case where we were able to identify a person that we think that is connected to the case. How? Because of OPSEC mistakes. And if you remember the everyone agree, RM-GRI5, everyone makes mistakes. Even the best of the best, the top guys out there, they still make mistakes. So all you need to do is to try to find the mistakes and to leverage the mistakes to find who did it.
I gotta ask about number 4 as well. So that's a 3.5. Is there a number 4 where not you specifically, but ransomware hunters in general, writing business logic software to go on C2s and retrieve data that might have already been uploaded somewhere? Is there an element there? And can you talk a little bit about the legality of that in Europe, if it might be different from what it is here?
I heard there's a lot of interest, and sometimes the customers, they just come and they ask, hey, can you confirm that our data was stolen? And how can you confirm the data was stolen? The most powerful confirmation is just to try to find the ransomware site where they actually leak the data if you don't pay the ransom, and to try to download it and to confirm that it is the same. And I think that this has become...
but that is just monitoring leak sites, right?
To monitor the specific leak sites associated with the ransomware groups. But it's funny how recently a lot of ransomware groups have added CAPTCHAs and JavaScript. So to automatically download all the leaks for something has become a standalone problem by itself. And I know people who vibe code it, download tools, they use AI to bypass the CAPTCHAs and trying to download the data from the ransomware leak site, which is kind of funny and crazy at the same time. And I know what you mean, the striking at the attackers. It's not something that we do personally.
I'm talking about breaking into their C2s and seeing what's there and retrieving what's there, maybe deleting stuff. I don't know if that happens.
It's not. I think it happens not with us. We don't engage in any kind of offensive operations, but I do know that law enforcement constantly does that, and we discussed it in the past when law enforcement agencies were, deciding, let's strike this site, what do we do, what do we get from there, do we burn them, do we destroy the infrastructure? So it happens. This happens a lot, and it's not, like I said, it's not something that we do, but we are always on the watch for mistakes. What do you mean by mistakes? Maybe it's an onion site, right? and somehow you can find the real website behind that onion. And once you have the real website with support from law enforcement, maybe you can get a copy of that. And maybe the copy holds the encryption keys, which you can use to help the customer.
I'll bring in Juanito in a second, but there's another thought that crossed my mind, and I never really get to talk to people who deal with these incidents, is how often what is your stance or your take on customers paying the ransom? How often are you telling them, hey, listen, go ahead and pay? How often do they want to pay? And you're telling them, no, like, what is that? What is happening around payments in the background?
With the customers that we've worked with so far, nobody paid the ransom. They did ask for our opinion in terms of negotiating, and we advised not to negotiate and not to pay the ransom. In some case, maybe you could even say that the ransom was not that big. It was $2,000 because it was just one person, like an accountant that got hit. Unfortunately, lost everything. Like no backups, the usual. No backups, nothing. Everything was lost. Yeah, there were, let's say, some copies of the data on sticks, but they said it will take months to try to recover everything. We'll have to ask the customers again to resend the files, the documents, the balance sheets, everything. And was asking like, how about we pay the ransom? It's $2,000. Then we tried to get the data back, and I advised against it. And I don't think it's let's say good for anyone. Like even for you as a victim, if you pay the ransom, you automatically enter a mentality which tells you that the next time, I got hit, but I paid the ransom, I got my data back. If I get hit again, I'll pay the ransom, I'll get the data. And it's not a disaster for me that I didn't have an antivirus installed, that I didn't have backups. So you will keep or maintain the same kind of hygiene that got you there in the first place. While on the other hand, you don't pay the ransom and you struggle. What do you need to struggle with? First, deploy better security, change passwords, use a password manager, be mindful of spear phishing attacks, be mindful of social engineering. Don't click on all attachments. Don't put your passwords everywhere. Don't use the same password everywhere. Update that Fortinet router or whatever it is. Get better, defense, get better protection. If your free antivirus didn't catch it, try to go for a paid one, a better one. But if you pay the ransom, I think nothing will change. And
what if you're completely out of business and paying the ransom is the only way to get back into business? I'm just trying to, this is a big global problem because people pay the ransom. There is this money transfer happening. So people are paying the ransom. I'm trying to get into, Juanito, you can jump in here. Sorry, I got waylaid and kind of gone off on this tangent here. So you can jump in here and help me with your thinking as well. I'm trying to understand, what should I, as an organization, hoard some Bitcoins for that day that may happen? You should always
hold some Bitcoins. Just like that, Costin, you can do that anyways.
If you do that.
Right, but if I'm a doctor's office, and we're now out of business, and it's 3 days, 4 days. Now we have patients lining up, whatever it is. At some point, the desperation kicks in. What is your thinking around? You can't just tell people never pay the ransom because, in those cases, there's a desperate need to pay the ransom and get back into business. So what is the thinking there?
I've never understood the whole don't pay the ransom thing insofar as who are we giving this advice to? And the whole point being what are they using their computers for, right? To what extent are these things critical? To what extent are things timely? I think it's all a really unsatisfying situation, right? Of course, we shouldn't let these criminals get away with walking into a place, holding some shit for ransom, usually just some stupid, random files. It's just more inconvenient to try to, somehow do without them than it is to do with them. But I don't know how meaningful it is to actually get the files back. I don't know how meaningful it is to not, right? And that's my way of saying, these are such generalized circumstances, right? When we say don't pay the ransom, are we talking to a hospital or are we talking to, a random company, a CPA? Right? How much of this is just
think about some of the big ones that we've seen. It's not just hospitals. I always go to hospitals because, healthcare and blinky lights and ransomware taking out blinky lights is those things. But let's just go to a bank, a hotel somewhere.
But it does make a difference. It makes a meaningful difference to say which one are we talking to, and that's why I'm asking, because I think it's most of the time when we end up in these like blanket ethical discussions, there's no satisfying answer, and it feels almost like we're exchanging opinions, like it's a religious discussion, right? You're like, oh well, my God thinks that we shouldn't pay ransoms, and yours thinks differently, and I think that in my view, in my very particular sense of meta philosophy, that almost always highlights an overgeneralization. Like, we are overgeneralizing, we are not looking at the specifics, and therefore, like, there really is no clear answer, and it's a matter, like, it's more of like a holy war type thing. If we look at the specifics, if we look at these small time shops that don't have much going for them by way of backups, by way of IT support, by way of whatever, how do you look at those people and say, well, don't pay the ransom? And you go, okay, but we have no backups, and there's no dedicated IT person here, and we have 20 computers, and we need to be able to, it's your dentist office, right? There's all kinds of HIPAA problems. There's all kinds of theoretical concerns. And of course, you shouldn't be pumping money into a criminal ecosystem that motivates the criminal ecosystem to keep going. But from a practical standpoint, these people go, yeah, well, we use computers to make appointments and to hold people's stuff, and we can't, and we need to do that, right? So to me, I think it's important to get back to reality and make sure that we're speaking to people's reality. Because otherwise, what it becomes is this I should. You should change your password. You should, at some point, not do X, Y, and Z. But how do people actually use their computers? When it comes to the very, very big ones, we've discussed this a million times, right? By the time we're having this conversation, pay or not pay the ransom, it's very much a spilled milk problem, right?
Yeah,
Did you have backups?
A long time ago.
You done fucked up a long time ago. We done fucked up a bunch of ways. Yeah, sure. Maybe we're talking about like this amazingly security forward place with all the preparations, and then damn, they got hit by a supply chain attack. Like the perfect storm happened, right? There was a 0 day. Oh, okay. And then we have a more nuanced discussion. But in most cases, the issues were all from the before time. You don't have perfect options. Sometimes you don't have any options. So I just don't like this whole, like, do you pay or do you not pay? The funny thing is, I think the interesting discussions about whether you should or shouldn't pay have more to do with companies that are paying these ransoms because they think it's going to limit their bad PR. It's not limiting the exposure, right? You're still you're counting on a thief's honor that they're going to delete the stuff they took. Okay. I think the only way that really feels meaningful to me is if you tell me that they stole so much data that the storage costs are like a little, at some point they're going to be like, yeah, we need that disk space back. But I don't know that's really how any of that actually works. And they're criminals. You're telling me these people don't resell the data on the back end? Like, they're really not going to go looking for somebody to say, hey, even just the Russian gov or whomever else, you go, hey, I've got everything out of this defense contractor. It's all dirty because we don't like to think about the reality of it. But
fair enough.
What exactly are you paying for? Half the time you pay for the decryption keys, and the decryption mechanism is so slow that you're still trying to like restore from backups on some of the computers, and then the other ones you're trying to decrypt. Like, the reality of it is just, it's not that smooth.
People are paying.
It's not that pretty.
That's why it's big business.
Double extortion works, man.
$1,000 ransom demand. Is that a typical one for like, how is it based? Like, how do they come up with these numbers?
Well, in that case, it was just, like I said, an accountant.
Right, a one-man show.
Just a one-man show, right? A small company. I think, the moment that you breach a network or you breach a computer and you realize it's just one computer, then okay, something between $300 and $2,000 can be on the table. If you breach a network and then you suddenly find yourself, let's say, into a network with 50 computers, then that means that probably it's a company, and you can look up public numbers to see like what are like their sales, how much are they making per year. And generally, all the ransom numbers depend on whatever sales they're making every year. And if you make, let's say you do like $1 million in sales per year, it's quite feasible. And I've seen the cases when the ransom comes in the range of 50 to 100,000 So like 10% of your public sales number. I've seen it happen like many times. Then, of course, if you're like a big company with thousands of machines there, right, or tens of thousands of machines that got hit, and terabytes of data and servers, and the ransom can easily jump in the range of millions. I think some of the highest that I've seen were in the range of 30 million, $50 million ransom. And I even know people who paid millions. There's people that I've seen that paid millions of dollars for the decryption keys and not to get their data listed. So yeah, it happens.
Good luck. Good luck to you, and
Thank
good
you.
luck to everyone with their ransomware infections. It continues to be like a wealth transfer, a nation to nation wealth. Are we still looking at the majority of cyber criminals in the ransomware ecosystem in Russia? Is that a fair assessment, or is it all around?
Two of the three cases that we've seen recently were, I think, Russian criminals. One, I don't think so. One seemed like it was European. I mean, we shared the discoveries with law enforcement, and law enforcement is doing their own investigation now. But to me, it looked that they were based out of an European country.
Best of luck to everyone. Juanito, how are you, my friend?
I mean, better than the people with these ransoms, I guess. I'm well, man. I don't know. I'm so like AI pilled these days that I'm starting to really like look at the security space.
It's a lost cause.
Yeah. I think a lost cause. I was gonna say, like, it's not like I'm bored by it, but I feel like my mentality is definitely like a lost cause mentality. And I think that's kind of led me into a much more conceptually broad thinking sort of place where I'm trying to think about how we redefine computing as a security first paradigm, since we have the opportunity to do so right now. This is like the next 5 years are going to see all computing redefined. So it's hard to like really get hung up on the specifics of what's happening today, right? Like, oh, NPM, like another supply chain attack, right? Like, you're like, yes, we've established that this happens, and it can happen, and therefore it will happen, and all of a sudden everything's
dude.
I'm not trying to. The reason I'm bringing it up is not so much to be a killjoy as much as like I'm hearing other people talk the same way, so it's not just me. And I think that's very interesting. I have this like thesis that for some reason, I don't know why, man, I haven't quite figured it out, but I really think that security people are the ones that take into AI, like who get really like AI pilled, seem to be in a really good place to do the AI thing, almost better than some of the AI people. I don't know if it's the adversarial mindset. I don't know if it's the fact that like we've been hacking our way against all odds this whole time. I don't know if it's being informed by like malware analysis and reverse engineering mentality. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just threat modeling as a day job, right? Like, so you're thinking about how to keep this toddler from running around and like breaking everything and sort of, hopefully behaving. When I talk about these things, I'm not bringing in like the sadness and doom and gloom. It's more like let's stop talking about the broken thing and figure out what the fixed thing would look like. Like what should it, now is the time where we can seed those ideas at some of these other folks and then hopefully, get better systems. So that's where my mind's at.
Meanwhile, NASA astronauts on the way to the moon cannot open Microsoft Outlook because there's 2 icons and none of them is working.
Well, that's not new either.
Why would they put Windows on a spaceship? Who does that?
Why would they put Outlook in Windows on a spaceship?
Imagine the indignity of calling an IT person as a fucking genius astronaut floating in space, living like shit for humanity, and you're like, fucking Microsoft, bro. Like, oh, can we get on a Teams call? And you're just like, fuck. Like, if I open this window, maybe I can spare myself and everyone on here having to deal with Teams. And like, surely you think about it, right?
I kid you not, that was the problem. There were 2 icons of Outlook on the desktop and none was working. And you know what the answer was from NASA?
Reboot.
They can try to remotely Oh, they try rebooting. Obviously they try.
On and off again, please.
No, they said like, oh, we can remotely try to log in and try to fix it. Remotely log in over whatever connection it is. I think the harsh realities of course, there's the AI, and everyone, it seems to me, that it's kind of waiting it out. That was the feeling that Harun was also talking about at RSA, that everyone is kind of, not knowing what to do, so just waiting it out. And meanwhile, the harsh reality is that there's two icons of Outlook and none of them works.
I want to get into the red pilling part of it because I feel like something happened recently, and I'll pin it to this Nicholas Carlini talk at Unprompted, Black Hat LLMs. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch it, but it's making the rounds and it's triggering a lot of like holy moly, holy shit moments with a lot of folks. And I'll point you to a Tom Ptacek. Ptacek's vulnerability research is cooked essay. Ptacek is old Matasano. It's like one of the OG guys, basically saying, listen, it's not a gradual thing happening. It's here. It's here. I can point an agent at a code base and say, find me an ODE, and it finds an ODE, and I can click a button and say, exploit it, and it'll write the exploit. And we're like, we're here. I had a conversation with an old security OG who mirrored exactly what Ptacek is saying here and saying, listen, Ryan, stop with your doubting the hype. It's not hype anymore. It's actually happening. The guys at Caliph, Bruce Dang, and what's his name?
Jonathan Ness?
No. The other guy who went over there. Tavis Ormandy went to Caliph as well, right?
Wow.
So
Okay,
those guys are running a month of AI discovered bugs, and one of it was literally find me ODE, write the exploit, and they documented it. So it feels like the AI pilling is I don't know.
I've been telling you, it's no fucking joke. I don't know, dude. Like we've been showing it to you. Like you live here with me, and I'm just bitching about these things all day, and you're like, I don't know if it works. I'm like, bro, like I just need you to get on Claude Code. Like you need to.
Well, the show and tell is here. I mean, it's now flagging into people's brain. It's not. I wasn't alone in questioning the fact that aardvark was a thing that I'm so overwhelmed. Because I'm so overwhelmed by this industry and their vaporware and their promises and their hype and what AI is going to do to transform everything, right? That I was being, I don't know, careful. I don't know what to describe it, but I've had conversations with people who are playing with this stuff and who have figured out that even like the private models that Anthropic has is like blowing people's minds.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Look, the shit's real. And I'm kind of glad that we can get to a point where we can say, hey, like, this shit works. Oh my God. Like, I'm glad it's coming from the vuln research people because they tend to be very loud. They tend to be very assertive in their beliefs, which is a good, it's a good way to kind of cut through a lot of noise. And a lot of them were the ones that were very skeptical originally, which was odd. Because within that same vuln research space, not only did you have, obviously Dave Eitel, who's been, speaking quite openly about these things, and Sean Heelan, who's done like open experiments in front of all of us, but you had Perry. And Perry Adams built AIXCC before any of this hype. And they were setting this shit up years ago. And there's literally like documented setups and harnesses and experiments, all of which got open source from AIXCC. So like it's been laid out in front of us that this was going to be a thing, right? That these, when I say this is going to be a thing, I mean like that the AI train was coming for vuln research and was going to just ram through it no matter what.
A lot of it is denial though, right? Like, a lot of it is those old school guys in their own denial about their own kind of greatness.
I think that there's denial. I think in reality, it was just a disassociative, like, myopicness where you go, what I do is hard and it's cool and I want to do it. And I don't really want to think about the possibility that, like, this isn't the thing anymore. And it's kind of funny, right? Because it's like the information workers dilemma where we've so cockily made it through this early 21st century thinking, well, there's no way I won't be necessary. Like, I'm special and so smart, and what I do is so hard and so niche right? That like I will have a job forever. And I think that's still the case, but it's not as easy to
A completely different
substantiate
job.
that.
Yeah.
It's not
And
as
it's going
easy
to be
to
a completely
substantiate
different
that.
job.
Yeah, for sure it will be a completely different job. And I've been, Ryan, you've heard me on stage, off stage, on this podcast, wherever. I've just been yelling at people to like embrace it, super fucking hard, right? Like to just like let it wash. A dam is breaking. It's going to destroy, it's going to flatten everything out here. Everything is, it's going to just flood, and the levee is breaking, and it's going to destroy everything around us. And I've been trying to tell people to learn how to surf and to like, you know, remember that we fucking, exactly. Like I've been trying to tell people to remember that we fucking hated this neighborhood anyways. Like this city sucked. So just let it wash the whole fucking thing away. The people who should rightly be scared are the people who are subsisting off of the support systems that are currently in place for the security industry. By that I mean you're doing security marketing, you're doing security, you know, IT support stuff, you're in HR related to whatever, because the vessels, the structures, the organizations, those are the ones that are going to feel the headwinds heavy. And I have no idea where that's going. I have no fucking clue. If, you know, the moat is you happen to have so much money already in the bank and like an agent that sits on a computer. So even though everything about your business has become redundant and cheap and whatever, somehow you can play the finances game well enough where you survive and then you find a new niche in this new world. Maybe that's the way it goes. But for me, I'm expecting company names to change drastically, like the ones we talk about day in, day out. I'm expecting security products to become either quickly subverted or replaceable with something readily available online, relatively free. But I also, part of the reason you don't hear me speculating about those things so readily, it's not that I don't want to speak in claims that can then be refuted. I know I'm wrong. I just don't know how I'm wrong. But it's more that I don't super care about the next, like, about predicting the next 2 years. Like, I don't really care about forecasting the death of the RSA spectacle, because I'm reminded that the RSA spectacle has always had very little to do with the reality of security as a field, as a practice. The companies have always had very little to do with security as a field, as a practice. They've just been keeping us employed and entertained and distracted. And at this point, there's no reason for any of those things to be the case, but I warn against fear making I said it maybe 2 episodes ago. I'm like, fear and anxiety, they make your field of vision pinhole sized. And we get very myopic, and you're scared and you don't look up. And I think the best thing that will happen to any security practitioners right now is to like just force your head out of the sand and like look up. And suddenly what you realize is like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen in the security space, but like I have superpowers. All of a sudden I'm 10 feet tall, dude. Like I can do whatever I can leap over buildings. And then the question becomes like, all these like superhero bullshit analogies of like, oh, you can fly, and you go, yeah, and where am I going now, right? Like the cool thing now is you get acquainted with what you can do, and then after the shine wears off and you're done with the vibe coding slot machine, and you go, oh, yeah, okay, I can make websites quickly. I can build myself a custom little app. I can have, every time I start up a terminal, it has a little train that runs by and it tells me about my emails. That's great. I've always wanted this. Like whatever the fuck, like whatever nonsense it is you're doing with the vibe coding slot machine, once that wears off, then the question becomes, oh, holy shit, okay, well, what does this mean about how computers work? And what does this all mean about how we are going to use computers? Because, like, the question is not security. I don't give a fuck about how to secure the current syncing thing. Like, I'm trying to, but I just don't. because I feel like the next model's coming out and it's complete. Sorry, that's the wrong thing because it's confusing now. But the next new paradigm in computing is going to come, and in order to tell you how to secure it, I kind of need to know what it is. So this is like a great time for, I think, security people. I'm not telling everybody to pivot. I'm saying like maybe take a few months to think about what this shit should look like.
Costin, are we over-indexing as a whole on finding and exploiting vulnerabilities, and nobody can tell me how any of this shit gets fixed? I mean, like, the fixing part of it seems entirely not even in the conversation. And before LLMs and before this tipping point that Nicholas Carlini kind of flagged in our brains, right? Before that, the entire place is shit. Now you're getting to a place where, and then this is a point Ptacek raised, which is this target expansion. You know, in the past, like these best of hackers, Project Zero and so on, would focus on these high value targets, browsers, mobile phones, and so on. There's no cost to any of this anymore. And Ptacek's argument is that, like, listen, this elite attention that we enjoyed for so much of our time is now completely changing because you have these LLMs hitting everything: routers, printers, hospital systems, IoT devices, things that require people to physically show up to patch them. And I'm just wondering, like, what is the future? If that's our future, right? Like, when does fixing, like, what does that look like when everything is just exposed?
Before we talk about fixing, I think the first thing to kind of, people should acknowledge that. And I think that on short term, yes, we're going to see a lot more vulnerabilities being disclosed or maybe even exploited, which will probably drive down the costs of that. So like all these companies that were, buying zero-click chains with persistence for $20 million, I think that the costs of all those vulnerabilities will go down. And that will be obviously because it will be easier and easier for anyone to produce these vulnerabilities, to produce the exploit chains, and to sell them. So then you get flooded, and when you get flooded with vulnerabilities, then you pause the program, as we have already seen, right? That different vulnerability companies, they just pause their vulnerability buying programs whatsoever. So I think that on short term, that's good, because inevitably it will lead to more bugs being disclosed, more bugs being found, so the security will increase. One thing that I still don't see with AI, I mean, if everyone's saying like, the AI overlords, Messiah, and whatever, where is the, operating system that has been rewritten from scratch in whatever, Rust, whatever you want, by AI without any mistakes, that is totally secure, and we can all use it and be merry. So
is that the future Juanito is trying to hint at, where it's like take 2 months off and try to figure out what his new OS looks like? Is that what you're hearing, Costin?
Let's ask him later. What I think is that, like, part of this road, if you want, like the roadmap, first we'll see a decrease in prices. So we'll see probably more bugs being disclosed, more attacks happening, and so on, but immediately we'll see a decrease in prices, which is good. So then kind of all the bugs will get fixed, new, more secure drivers will be written, better operating systems will appear, and then you will suddenly see that the bag of old days kind of has drained. Like, you can't maintain this carriage, if you want, of 0 days forever. Like, at some point it will drain. Like, no matter how good the AI it is, like, it's also good at fixing them and developing more secure things, so then it will drain. And that's, I think, is when the prices of 0 days will increase like tenfold. So I think that during the next 5 years, we will see iOS chains, zero-click iOS chains with persistent, being bought for $50 million, $75, and even $100 million. Because after this, after the floodgates are down and the dam is down and like everything crashes and goes down in flames, after that, there'll be an era where security will spike. Everything will be rewritten from scratch, more secure, better things, and then you will see the prices probably also helped a bit by the inflation and the US national debt reaching $500 trillion, and selling of gold like across the world, and the Strait of Hormuz, and and so on and so on. And that, I think, is when we're going to see the real money in the zero-day exploitation business. So if you're in this field and you're freaking out like, oh my God, my kids are going to die of hunger, I don't think there's any worry that like these high-end people that we've been talking about will find themselves out of a job. Possibly during the next 5 years, there'll be a transition period, but afterwards, everyone will need the most skilled exploit developers who, together with the AI, so-called cyborg. This is like what Kasparov is calling cyborg chess. Long ago, he saw that computers will be much better than humans, and he said, like, it makes no sense as humans to play chess anymore. I can do it even with his Russian accent. This makes no sense to play chess anymore as humans because computers will always be so much better than us. And my idea is we need to play with a computer against another man with a computer. And that is what he calls cyborg chess, which is, in my opinion, a lot more interesting when you have like access to like the best AI, the other guy has access to the best AI, and you guys play whatever game.
What are we doing? It's a challenge prompt, prompt challenge.
Prompt challenge? No, but like it's more of a fight between how the man, like, you know, machines are good with data, machines are good with processing, people are good with intuition. So I think the mix between the machine and the big data and all that and the AI and the human intuition together is, you know, what is like the next thing and the next big thing that has to follow after this singularity, after the AI singularity. It'll be the human machine team, the cyborg chess, or the cyborg security.
That was literally the title of the book by the head of 8200 that got like outed.
Which one? Cyborg chess?
The human machine team. It's literally
the human general. What was it? GS.
Juanito walks away to his bookshelf.
Autographed. Show us the autograph.
No, none of that.
No autograph.
That. But yeah, it was. I mean, the whole point of the book was like that pairing, right? Because for anybody who was already working on any of these things, you go, the real issue here is not, does this thing work? It fucking works, and it's gonna keep getting better. And even if it doesn't get better, it's done enough where like it already changes everything we do. It's just unevenly like percolated. So the question from a change management perspective, organizational perspective, even like personal workflow perspective is, how do you use these things efficiently? How do you use them cost effectively? How do you use them with a high ROI? How do you use them reliably? And, you know, how do you reorganize a company around that? Like, I think it's a fucking nightmare right now to think about being a company with 1,000 fucking engineers. Just think about this problem, right? You are a company paying to employ 1,000 engineers with their team leads and their managers and then product managers and all the whatever. And the way to do engineering effectively just changed, like in a matter of like 2 months. And if you're lucky, some of those engineers on their off time and their free time, out of pure curiosity, have been kicking in the tires like on their, you know, of their own accord, and they know how to use it, kinda. But the other 900 engineers, no fucking clue. The people who run the org, hopefully they have a good sense on their shoulders. But there is no playbook. There's no like McKinsey like consultant that walks in and goes, okay, these are the trainings we need to give your engineers. This is how you're going to restructure your code production pipeline and your product management meetings. Like, nobody knows what the fuck is going on. They just know that they're doing it wrong. That's the reality of corporate life right now. Nobody knows what they should be doing. They just know that what they're doing is wrong. And if they're not saying that, they're just not admitting it. That's it.
How much are you getting that one engineer doing tinkering on this side, getting that pushed back into the organization? Is there like Juanito, let's say you go off on the side and you figure out something that you can do with AI and you come back to Sentinel-1. Like, what is the corporate structure? Not at Sentinel-1, but generally around getting ideas baked back into old traditional
I think
thinking?
it has everything to do with the health of the organization as it stands in the first place. And I'm afraid that most places don't have a healthy culture. Because I think
It's
the
a little bit of
culture
a double-edged sword there, though, right? We're going to accept a lot of tinkering, and let's be careful about dumping AI into everything. We started to see Microsoft ripping AI out of places where they started to think of force. Like, what is that trade-off?
But
What is that balance?
Microsoft's not a good example of anything, right? Like they weren't. No. It's not to shit on them. It's just like
Yes, you are.
I don't.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
look, I just think it's a bad example. Not that necessarily we have a lot of good examples. So the thing with Microsoft ripping the AI out of everything, we were forecasting it the whole fucking time that they were adding their AI into everything to like pad their numbers on like token consumption and like, oh yeah, we're such a great AI provider. Everybody wants our AI. It's like, yeah, because we've been forcing it into every fucking product, including Notepad. And like the people who have to use Copilot, I feel so bad for people. Like one of the things that I like, I can't stand looking at subreddits for like AI stuff because you go into the comments of any story and people's perception of what AI is and what it can do is so like they are universes apart. And you can tell you're like, yo, that person has only got Copilot. Because they think it's like a dumb chatbot with no memory, and it just like it's mistaken all the time. It's hallucinating all the time. It like it starts to summarize something, and then it like loses track of what it was saying, starts talking to you about something else. Like
and these guys had an exclusive head start on everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, like I've been making fun of Microsoft on this AI shit.
It's mind-boggling how
but
Microsoft, like, had this exclusive access to OpenAI, ChatGPT from the very, very first days. Satya was like the guy, and they're way behind. Like, how is that even possible? Yeah, but go back to making your point. Sorry.
If I may ask,
please.
If you say Microsoft is way behind, where is Apple?
Also, well,
are they like way behind Microsoft, or where do you put them?
So I don't like putting any of these companies in the same lanes because I think they all have very different focuses. And like when I've said this before, I know people have like complained, right? Like I was like saying that I think I said that Apple wasn't a services company or somebody, right? Like and someone lost their shit about that. And I'm like,
someone showed you a financial number with how much they sell in services.
Yeah, and I'm sure that person is very impressed by that amount of revenue, but compared to the size of Apple, that's fucking paltry money. And most of it, you have to remember, is the App Store racket, which is just, I'm just skimming money off the top from everybody else. That's like, yeah, they're counting that as a services win. And yeah, for sure, it's a service. Yeah, but like, let's not say that they're developing and maintaining services the way that like Google develops and maintains services, right? Like that, those are fucking different universes. But like, I wasn't trying to dodge the question. I would just say like, Microsoft is super behind in AI in a way that we need to, that we should unpack in its own way. And then Apple is way behind in AI in a totally different way worth unpacking. And it's, I think, very relevant to how they see themselves as companies and how they present themselves, what they think their core strength actually is. So on the Apple side, they've been buying a bunch of AI companies, and Apple has like traditionally done a whole lot of ML forward things, right? Like there's a reason Spotlight has been indexing, what the content of your pictures is on device for a very long time. And that works in a surprisingly well way, considering that it's being done on device. And those are things that you have to give them. I also think that it's a little unfair how much I rag on Apple, considering that most people that have any access to local inferencing are doing that on MacBooks because Apple Silicon processors are fucking amazing, right? So like you might give them shit because they haven't figured out how to integrate AI, and like Siri feels like it's just like it has a handicap that I have no clear way on how to like properly express. It just feels so old gen that you can't possibly give Apple credit for that. So like there's this split, but clearly on the hardware side, Apple has been amazing. Like unified memory and like these neural processing engines inside of every GPU.
That's why you don't discount them in this AI race.
But how much of that was intentional and how much is just collateral,
No.
It happens to be better than others at running AI locally.
Was it deliberately chasing this running AI locally market?
I don't know that they were so yes, and yes. right? Like it's sort of collateral in the sense that I don't think that anyone at Apple foresaw that the LLM revolution was suddenly going to explode. I don't think that that's what happened. It's not that they could foresee it. However, it's also not incidental. Like they have been driven by this unerring better. It must be thinner. It must dissipate with less heat. It must be better at we have to have better management of the battery. We have to have, like, there is no complacency at Apple when it comes to that really low level underlying hardware thing. And in that, like, there's a reason we all buy. I own like fucking 30 Apple devices, right? Like anything they make on a hardware standpoint, I'm like, this is going to be phenomenal. They have been killing themselves trying to figure out how to make it better. Is it the latest, greatest feature? The latest possible thing? No. And we can, and those are all other discussions. Then when I start talking about Apple and China, like we go down this predictable path. But anyways, Apple, I think, should get credit for having gotten us to this point, right? Like the unified memory strategy, the Apple Silicon strategy, it has been phenomenal. And you know that the day anybody comes up with a good use for local inferencing, that you're going to want a Mac and it's going to make it fucking awesome. But like, if you ask me, the company I would start today would be one creating a new operating system meant to run on Macs. That's entirely generative. That's the thing I would, if somebody walked in with a check today, like that's the thing I would go build. That's the thing you have to build now.
I remind you that Apple also proactively invested in this private cloud compute, which when the privacy conversation starts to happen, that's going to be one of the main things. And this is a place where even Apple itself can't see what anyone else is doing on there. I mean, the idea of building this thing. Juan, linger a little bit on your whole new OS thing. Are we talking... I had a conversation with someone who predicted that we were going to use Claude Code maybe not even in a year, to just kind of generate ephemeral throwaway apps on the fly. Hey, make me a notepad. Generate a notepad on the fly. I do whatever I need to do in Notepad. It disappears forever, and you do it again tomorrow with whatever app you want to make. Like that's kind of like a future of these ephemeral throwaway things powered by AI. Are you talking about even a step below that?
Yeah, I'm
Describe your thinking.
So I think we're always encouraged by the AI, like the frontier labs, to think about whenever people say, well, how do I start a company? If I make a thing tomorrow, OpenAI releases a feature and now like my company is pointless, right? Like it's been rendered useless. And the response from the frontier labs is usually, well, the models are going to keep improving and they're going to keep getting cheaper. So plan for, whatever it is that you want to build, you have to build it for not the models of today, but the models of a year from now, right? Okay. Like, in
perpetuity, right? Like forever.
Yeah, sure. In their minds, it's going to happen forever, right? But I can definitely see that it's the truth for the foreseeable future. And I think the more meaningful part is cheaper, faster. Because frankly, like, I can't foresee how technology is going to continue to develop in like new frontier being broken, new, entirely new modality coming about. But I can tell that the advancements we have so far have not been properly marbled into technology yet. And like, that's one of the things, even when we're talking about the patches and the vulns thing, like, yeah, it's easier to patch vulnerabilities, but it's not easier to distribute software to people. It's not easier to get people backported stuff. It's not easier to get people to install their patches. It's not easier to have these devices actually patched. So I think what instead we're going to see is, I think the price of vulnerabilities is going to drop. The ubiquity of vulnerabilities is going to, increase. But instead, like, how long before people are talking about whether they should be connected to the internet? Right? Like, if you're telling me that, like, you're connected and everything is fucking, like, every device is getting hit at any given moment, and the internet, as I said many episodes ago, is very unforgiving all of a sudden. At what point do you go, well, like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, can we just get on like a private network of some sort, or like somebody have like a mediated content experience where we don't actually have access to everything and everyone has access to us? Because all of our devices are shit and we can't get them patched because they're all closed source. And we have to wait on some upstream vendor that has no obligation to release a patch, right? Like, anyways, like, I digress. You asked about the OS thing, and I think we need to have a conversation about at what point can we actually develop an operating system that is generative first. And I say that as in we have just enough of a kernel that includes the code factory, it's code signed, and then everything that comes, every bit of software that comes from that point forward is something that was developed, baked inside of that machine. And I'm obsessing over code signing because my idea in all of this is that's the part that can actually change the computing paradigm, the personal computing paradigm. Because the thing to discuss these days is our existing computing paradigm is the equivalent of like doing IV drugs and sharing needles. Like the fact that like I go and like get your code and run it on my thing, and then I connect to some random website and I download some compiled binary and put it on my thing. Sorry, my computer just locked up. I don't know if you guys can still.
We can hear you.
Me? Oh,
you
thank
can
God.
Still hear you.
My whole computer just locked up. Anyways, so
You're bad mouthing the computer.
I'm doing it blind right now.
But can I stop you just for a moment and ask, how is that different from like the new generation of people who, instead of downloading the binary from some website, they just run npx install something and then building with dependencies from 100 other projects, and one of those other projects gets hacked and trojanized with something?
It's the exact opposite. So, and that's my point. I'm obsessed with the scenario you're describing, Costin. And look, npm, brew, apt, snap, cargo, pipey, these things are going to be the end of us. And the more that we look at it now as like this acceleration of possibility and capability, the more we're just going to see just how much we have been trying to, like, we've been tasked with taking on a transcontinental voyage on a ship made of Swiss cheese. There's more fucking holes in the hull than you could think of, and you're trying to plug them with your fingers, and we're hoping to make it, to the other fucking side of the ocean, and half of the crew is hungry mice. And they're starting to dig in at it from the inside. The truth is, this shit is never... It was never... Oh, so the opposite being, when we talk about trusted computing, the whole point of trusted computing was like, we can have a chain of execution that we know we trust, and therefore we are latching onto this foundation of trust and building off of it. And you need it to some degree. The problem was, at some point you were going to execute somebody else's code. So what I ask you now is, in this new paradigm, if the thesis proves out that we can build code factories that essentially just get tokens injected into them, and you suddenly have your own notepad, and now you have your own browser, and now you have your own whatever, then why the fuck am I ever running somebody else's code? As opposed to coming to my trusted code factory that lives in my OS and saying, I would like a browser that is pink and has cats that run all over it. That's what I want my browser to be. It has to fit this spec. It has to be this like secure whatever. It has to work in this way. You're
writing your own rendering engine on the fly. You're not relying on WebKit or anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, this.
And I'm saying, and it's just going to come back and say, I can do that for 500 million tokens, which will cost you like $17 and 4 hours. And you go, okay, well, I'll have a new browser when we're gone, and like you just run off. And if you think about it, right, you now have an operating system that's signed by some developer that you go, okay, I trust the Anthropic OS. I trust Claude OS. And therefore, this computer only runs code that is signed by this one certificate authority, which is this CloudOS authority. Because everything that will run on that computer is being baked derivative of that software chain inside of your thing. Like, why the fuck would I ever take a patch from you? You send me a patch,
Same
Sorry,
problem,
Costin, go ahead.
because you will for sure, in order to build a browser, you will need to link to libraries. There's no chance you will be able to write
Why?
everything from scratch.
He's saying you're generating everything from scratch on the fly.
Let me put
I
it a
think it's
different way.
impossible. I find it impossible that you'll be able to generate everything from scratch
With no dependencies or no...
with no dependencies, yeah.
What we need to define is what the kernel looks like with its like basic capabilities. And we don't have to start from scratch, right? Like if I decide that today is the like GNU epoch of the cutover, we're going to take the latest version of every standard library. Today's the cutoff. I'm no longer taking code from anybody. I, Anthropic or OpenAI or whomever, I'm going to take this shit and go back to the mines, and I'm going to refine the absolute shit out of the source code, out of all of them up until this point. And from that point forward, I am providing the Google DeepMind open source standard libraries. We will maintain them, we will whatever them, but in any case, this is the thing we're securing. And these are the capabilities on it. And when I ship you Gemini OS or Claude OS, it includes these libraries, and on top of them, you can patch and add functionality as needed. But it's happening in this segmented thing where I am like, why am I taking PRs from you? Why would I ever take anybody else's code? What I want is the intent. You come and you tell me, my intent here is to fix this bug that I see in your code, or to provide you with this feature. Okay, describe the feature. Got it. Thank you. Hey, here's a new recipe. Code Factory, like I would like this feature. And your computer, think of it as like Gentoo or Arch Linux. We used to sit there and like, it was a badge of honor that you compiled your own Linux kernel along the way, but you weren't reading any of that fucking source code, nor were, most of us were not writing any of that fucking source code. It's just, we were proud that we built it ourselves. You go, cool. It doesn't
Costin,
give you any greater sense of security, but
Costin,
it can
you're
now.
skeptical. You're skeptical that this is something that's practical and not just some academic kind of conversation.
Doubt that the build factory can be maintained forever without updates, and I suspect that those updates will require external dependencies, so your kind of trust chain will over time expand to include, let's say, Ryan's work, my work, the work of our friends, and their work will also expand to include the work of their friends, and maybe the community will somehow be smaller, but nevertheless, the moment that something goes wrong, and it doesn't necessarily have to be hacking or someone gets owned, but it can be something as simple as the build factory hallucinates in a bad way. Mm-hmm. Let's say the way it processes some kind of an input from a website like Amazon. So you teach it, you say like, hey, I need a harness that helps me buy the cheapest products from Amazon in whatever category I need. So it builds you the tool or the browser or like whatever it is that buys you stuff from Amazon, but it also introduces like a tiny mistake there, which can turn into a buffer overflow or something similar. And somebody understands that and they know or learn how to leverage it against you. So you'll still have to update the build factory over time. And I think the risk is that the build factory itself will hallucinate from time to time. And there's no guarantee that when you ask for a notepad, it will give you a notepad.
Maybe well, that's one of the problems, right? That's one of the things.
We'll give you a paint with text or something like that, right?
That's one. I agree with you, Costin, but I'll nitpick at two things. One of them is the whole build factory building reliably. I think that's the main issue that the Frontier Labs are working on right now, whether they say so or not. that is like what billions and hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent on right now. And that's why, like, I'm not saying that that's something you can do today, but I am saying that I think if you pump hundreds of billions of dollars into this one problem, chances are these people are going to figure out some semi-reliable way of using these things. And if not them, then we should, because it's right there, right? Like, we're almost there. Like, we're so close to being able to have reliable code generation and whatnot. I just think we still need to figure some stuff out, but like, it's there. What I disagree with, like, on the earlier point, it's not that you wouldn't need updates. It's not that problems are not foreseeable. It's not that code is going to be perfect, but I don't know that we need the external dependencies. Like, that's the thing. If I am willing to trust Anthropic or trust, like, the way that we trust Apple right now, you already trust them to give you an operating system that's semi-hardened, and that they're going to have updates, and they're going to have code signing, and they're going to be the ones sending you the updates. It's like, you already trust them on a bunch of levels. I think the issue is having to trust them in perpetuity and having to trust everybody else that you meet online to, like, share this code execution needle with you. But I do think that, like, it's possible to do the no dependencies thing at this point. Like, if you're telling me that we have this level of code generation, Anthropic will, let's say, it'll take them 10 billion tokens to create this OS that's like your little code factory. But, like, sell it to me.
Aren't you proposing just replacing the existing OS makers with the frontier labs? I mean, like, this is, I think you're saying
it's it's almost an inevitability. And if they're not thinking about it this way, they're thinking too small. If they're not thinking about it this way, they're thinking too small.
Okay, and then the other question I have for you is, how much thought have you given to risk modeling the single point of failure from your single factory?
I'm trying to risk model. I'm trying to understand. But I think if you go a little bit backwards in this conversation, right, what I said is, guys, like, take a couple of months to stop and think about what the computing paradigm looks like. Because how do we discuss securing something when we don't know how it works? Like, we don't even know what it looks like, right? Security, I would like security to be a first order problem in the definition of this new computing paradigm. And to do that, I think some security people are going to need to stop chasing this, like, running on this infinite treadmill of bug and exploit and patch and malware and, like, the impact, and try to get people to fix, write the blog, Yara rule. Oh, look, another vuln, another patch, another thingy, the impact, the
cybersecurity. You're describing
cybersecurity.
Yeah, I know. And look, we've all done fine, but, like, at some point, if you are getting tired of, monster of the week, I would suggest reimagining what the writing of the show should look like. And to me, right, like, this is this week's, like, pet thesis for me. But the reason I'm talking about this OS at the OS level, and really what I mean to say is, like, the execution environment needs to be one also controlled by an LLM, and also one that's, like, leaning into the powers and capabilities that this new generative paradigm gives you. And if you give them their thesis, if you accept not the God will emerge from the machine, but that they're going to figure out how to build software reliably, then it's not that far down the line that we need to have discussions about systems that patch themselves and systems that build their own solutions. And I would rather take that 10 steps further and say, you know what we always thought was going to be the gold standard of, like, developing a good secure environment? Well, air gapping. But the truth is, just like in the infamous words of Nicole Perlroth, right? Air gap, stupid, ? Right? So simple. The truth is, no one's ever been able to build an actually properly air-gapped system, a network, anything, because you can control where the place is physically located, and you can, like, where the devices are physically located, and you can control some of the data flow, but you've always had to run someone else's code. They couldn't sit underground at Fordo and like write an OS and write all the software for all the Siemens PLCs and write everything, right? Like that was impossible. And therefore, you had systems that were designed to run whatever code was shoved into them. And I ask you now, if these people are right, if the AI companies can figure out how to reliably, within some bounds, produce software, then why does my computer need to run anybody else's software? I'm not saying I don't trust anybody. I'm saying I'm choosing to trust one company already. This is like that's my certificate, that's my root trust. If these people are fucking me, then I'm done. But that's always been the case.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you're just replacing one with the other. That's always been the case.
No, Ryan, because right now you trust everyone. You trust everyone. Anybody can drive by and be like, here's some code, and like, oh, well, here's this compiled thing. I don't know who the fuck even made it. Like, run, right? Like, you go into every website and it's just like it's running a bunch of other shit. You go and download something, you pull something from, you just like open the terminal and brew update runs and like 1,000 packages from different people you've never heard with every dependency. And like they're all baked together into this rotting carcass that we're all just shoving right into the computer.
How is that different from what like Claude is generating today that relies on this dependency and that dependency and that dependency?
It's not different. And that's my point. If we want to think about this differently, then we need to question assumptions like my computer should be built in a way that enables it to run anybody else's code. What if we just that one underlying foundational thesis of general purpose computing is one that I think we should discard and we should consider. What would it mean? What would it be like to have a system that is designed to run a single authority's code and nobody else's? Is it viable? I mean, like, I think video games would be hard, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff that like we would need to figure out, but I think that's a defensible surface. That is one that I can think about how to defend.
I want to take this ride with you. I really do, but I'm struggling a little bit with understanding it, and maybe you'll write a paper on it. Hopefully,
yeah,
we'll get to read.
I have to write something.
Some depth of your thinking, but I want to use this opportunity to also pivot to an essay published this week by our friend Chris St. Myers.
Oh shit!
From your team at Sentinel-1, is basically saying like what you're describing, this massive crazy rush to automate everything, all analytical work, automate everything with AI. You're destroying the very kind of tedious, hands-on, mystic-driven grunt work that's required for people to grow and learn, and like you only learn from these like tough crises or these tough things. And when you're throwing AI to fix everything, what happens generationally to people's education, to people's growth? I don't know. It got me to thinking. Costin, you ever thought at all on the human toll?
The human toll.
I don't know, or if there is any sort of human toll to come from this. Like, what does education, what does people's personal growth look like? What does people's ability to learn look like 10 years from now?
I thought it was wonderful that Chris wrote this blog. So something that, I recommend anyone to spend like a couple of minutes, go and find the Sentinel-1 website.
I'll put it
and
in the
read
show
blog.
description everywhere.
We'll put the link. It's a beautiful blog because it actually has the courage, and also it's kind of very realistic to write the things that others either may not see or may not have the courage to say. And I've seen what he's talking about, but I didn't know, what is the right way to approach it. Is it that actually you don't need these skills anymore? Because even, let's say, if people lose the skills, you will still have an AI that can do that job for you in the future. Or is it that you still need the people in your organization, maybe not necessarily juniors, but you need like the skilled experts with that intuition that I was talking about, that can combine whatever the AI brings, the big data processing and the experience, the expertise, whatever, with the intuition, that experienced researchers have. And I understand, let's say, maybe a bit better now after reading Chris' blog.
The cognitive rust belt. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. That the fact is that we're not gonna have experts anymore in 20 years or so to do the intuition part while working with AI if we continue in the same direction. And it's a legit warning here. People will of course get very good at using the AI, but I think probably we should consider having schools for people where they actually develop their intuition and skills to complement the AI. The skills that would allow you, let's say, to use the AI properly, the same way that Kasparov was saying when he talked about cyborg chess. Let the computer do all the thinking and give me options and allow me to choose the option that makes the most sense to me.
Well, you can let the computer tell you which option makes the most sense. It's all math anyway.
In some cases, it will be wrong. I think in some cases it will be wrong, and still you'll make a better choice because that may be even better for you in the context of your own life. So let's say when you ask for the notepad to be developed, maybe, I don't know, you don't like that X in the left top corner, and you'll have like several choices and you can select, but it won't feel that it's like something that you've built yourself or something that, gives you that feeling of living at home.
So that's what a cyborg chess does. It gives you like options on which place, or do you get percentages of where?
You know what happens, like if you put computers to play against each other, two things can happen. Either they draw forever, or the better AI will beat the other AI
he who has the most
times. 100 times out of 100. These are the two outcomes. Either they draw 100 times or one wins 100 times, or like one wins 90.
Right, and neither of those are fun.
What is the most amazing thing is that, let's say, when somebody plays the better AI and loses 50 times when playing to the weaker AI because the other guy has a better intuition. And of course, the problem with AI is like at this level is it will give you 5 choices. And one of those choices is always top. So let's say even like the best chess engines, the probability that the top moves will be one of those 10 is like 100%. The only thing is how the engine chooses one of those 10 moves. Like in the end, you need to choose one, right? Like the next step is just like one choice. And like sometimes humans are better at doing that choice. Why? And like, what do you call intuition? I don't know how intuition necessarily works. Like if you consider the brain is purely chemical, or if there's like quantum processes happening, is like if like at those quantum processes time is linear or like it's a loop, and you actually see the outcome in advance through intuition of your choices, and you select the one that gives you the winning card. So all of that may be part of making the choice. But I do see there is an opportunity here to have schools where you teach people how to work together with AIs as opposed to punishing people when they use AI. So just to give you an example, my daughter was in class and they were doing like a history test, and a bunch of them, they've been using ChatGPT to refine their answers at the history test. Why?
As they should.
Because he's like, who remembers like the dates of like all these events like by heart, and what is the advantage of remembering all that stuff by heart? Is the AI not better at just remembering the raw data and allow me to choose like the text that goes into the final output that is, the most pleasing to read for a human or something like that? So yeah, instead of punishing people in schools for using AI, create schools where you teach them to work together with the AI and use their intuition to make the best choice, taking into account all these human factors and the things that AI cannot predict, basically.
But this is the point Chris is making in the essay, right? He is saying that once the technology matures and we get past this state where hallucination isn't necessarily a biggest problem, hallucination might maybe move the X from here to there. What companies are going to discover soon enough is that their staff and their people never built this deep domain intuition required to figure out if the AI is being thing. And I think that's the That's the worry and the warning here. And a lot of us are in denial about this.
It's a fair warning, and I think again this is it's a right blog, and it's not just technology companies. I think this problem is systemic. It will happen pretty much everywhere in any kind of company, not just technology companies. It will happen everywhere, even like in the fields, right? There's like people, I don't know, growing potatoes, and then you'll replace them with robots who will go and grow the potatoes, water them, pick them up from the soil. And whenever, I don't know, something goes wrong, that like some genetic mutation or a predator or something, I think the knowledge and the skills of knowing what to do, either to avoid that problem in advance or to fix it, will be a very rare commodity. And the people who will know how to fix things when everything else goes wrong will be very few and very well paid.
Juanito, aren't you finding this is already happening, that the AI is replacing the thinking itself in your own kind of everyday life? And are you worried at all about that? Because I've said it on this podcast a bunch of times. I worry about becoming slowly lazier and lazier and lazier, and critical thinking goes away. The AI does the thinking for me, so I don't have to. I push things off because I know I can get that done in 5 minutes versus spending some time and doing it properly. I don't know if it's happening to you already, but or maybe that's just the future. That's just the way we're going to be. I don't know. We're right in this tipping point.
You're asking several questions packed together, and I would like to address them separately, right? Do I see that happening in my life? Oh, absolutely, and on purpose. I do not want to spend any cognitive effort doing dumb, repetitive,
this is what the high school kids are thinking, right, Costin?
Well, no, wait, but it's a totally different thing. I know, like, I spent a great deal of time developing some critical thinking skills, and, like, it's not that I don't know how to do some of these things. It's that I'm acknowledging that figuring out how to do something should, like, having the time to go through the high entry threshold of figuring out how to do something myself is something, it is a cost that I'm choosing not to pay when it comes to certain things. And in the past, not being able to pay that cognitive cost meant that I had to deprive myself of the outcomes that come at the other side of having that skill. And I no longer need that to be the case, and I'm comfortable with that. But, like, I think St. Myers has a really good point in that I'm already a relatively fully formed person, and I'm already relatively comfortable with the areas that I know and I don't know, and I'm not deluding myself into thinking that I know how to do all the things that Claude Code can do for me. And that's very different than how do you get practitioners leveled up, right? Like,
entry-level folks people everywhere.
Yeah, and look, it's not that new. It was just hidden from us. And I'll say that from the perspective of somebody who's had to teach people how to do malware analysis and learned reverse engineering relatively late in my career, and then had to try to hire people to do those things. There's a reason we don't hire new grads for threat intel or for malware analysis or whatever from just about anywhere. Those people weren't being taught anything about how, like, a lot of people going through computer science, and you can come out of the nicest school, but, like, you're not really being taught assembly anymore. You're not really being taught operating system underlying concepts. You weren't being taught how compilers work necessarily. Like, maybe you had like an overview in like one class at the very beginning of computer science, but most of these people would walk out knowing how to use the latest and greatest frameworks for this and that and distributed systems and like all this super high level things that are very useful for building on the cloud or whatever. But then you ask them how to do some basic reverse engineering, and you realize that they don't understand any of the subsystems, and they don't understand how these things interplay, and they don't know how code goes from being code to being a binary, and what happens to a binary when it was being run by a system, right? Like, those things you had to learn backwards and through, you know, sweat and effort. So I think coming from somebody hiring in the malware analysis space, I was never under the impression that people were being properly trained for our craft. And St. Myers' point hits even harder because I think people weren't even learning enough of this to begin with. And now you're telling me that we're going to automate a lot of the malware analysis stuff and some of the more complex tasks like vulnerability research. We're outsourcing them to these machines. Yeah, I don't know how you're going to train a vulnerability researcher. Like, it's almost,
You won't have to, though. I think that's the point, is no one has to think for themselves. And it's not new. I'm glad you bring up the point that it's not new. There's always a Dan Geer essay. In 2015, Dan Geer draws this parallel between like aviation automation and pilots never learning, with all these self-flying autopilot tools available in modern aircraft, that pilots never got to learn critical problem solving because the machine and the automation did it for him. This is kind of like the future we're heading into with AI, where no one has to think about anything and we're losing that ability to think.
I think, look, man, I agree and I disagree. I agree in that we don't have a clear sense of what education is going to look like, and we don't have a clear sense of how we're going to level people up. But I think that also goes hand in hand with like not having a good understanding of what it is you're hiring people for right now. Like, what do roles look like when you don't know what the craft is going to look like? At the same time, I would argue that, and I'm sorry, this is where I'm going to like get my elitism is going to shine in some ways, but like most people weren't getting well educated in the fucking first place. Like, college educations in the United States have become about standardized testing, as has most schooling. So like this notion that like we are just producing all these fully formed critical thinking people is ridiculous. Half of the tech sector has been, at least in our time or my time, has been lauding people who like whose greatest claim to fame was dropping out of college at the right time. And you're like, yeah, oh my God, those people don't seem to know shit about ethics. You go, yeah, they skipped that class on the way to becoming entrepreneurs that know how to write code. So like, I'm glad everybody's suddenly concerned about the educational
but you can
system,
fix that,
but
right?
like,
you could fix that. The problem is that this gap that
you
AI
can't
is
fix
generating
that.
is going to be. Well, you can always educate someone to learn something they didn't learn through standardized testing in high school. Wait a second.
I'm sorry.
Wait a second.
I don't. No. I'm not going with you there. I think you could absolutely show people how to do things with standardized tests. I don't think you can easily walk somebody through critical thinking. You can't easily walk somebody through becoming, a skeptical person or like having an ethical background.
A high school kid that went through this whole notion of what education looks like today, standardized testing, blah, blah, blah. You can still educate them. You can still bring them into an entry-level place and educate them and have them learn from defeat and friction and so on. What Chris is saying, what St. Myers is saying here is that this gap will be permanent when AI is embedded in our world, that no one will be able to think again in the future, because we're not dealing with friction at all. There is no friction in our lives.
I don't disagree with St. Myers' premise. I do think we need to consider that what we are getting now is more abstraction. And this has happened a lot before, right? Like switching over from the abacus to calculators, there's a lot for us to complain about, that you're being abstracted away from a great deal many things. And that argument has been made, same as it was when we were talking about like people can Google and whatnot. And I'm not
people
trying to
say
say
they're the same. Photoshop, but now you can do it at scale with Grok and put bathing suits on people. Like it's different.
I think it is different. I'm not saying it's not different. I am saying that what this technology is largely producing is a zooming out function, right? Like we had to zoom way in. When technology became a thing, when computers became relatively ubiquitous as I was growing up, if you wanted the benefits of what computers brought, you had to get in the guts of them. And you often forgot why you were there in the first place, right? Like maybe I just wanted to like listen to music, and 3 months later, I'm like in IRC and like chatting with people and figuring out how to do DCC and like how do I move things. Like I learned a bunch of shit. and I forgot about the music. You were just busy learning all this shit because you started with one thing and you ended up in the guts of something else, and it was awesome, and you learned something you didn't intend to learn. But I would argue that part of what we're being promised here is this notion that like the technology will just work. And when you grab a device and you go, I just want to listen to music, or I want to start a band, or I want to blah blah blah, the next step is just, here, you can listen to music, or you can start a band, or you can do whatever it is you were going to do. And that was kind of like, that was Steve Jobs' promise with like the iPad, for example. Right? It was like, they've always sold it as like, this is an enabler that lets people make art. And you're like, what the fuck, right? Like, that's A, extremely aspirational, but B, no, most of the time you're like debugging and trying to figure out like how to change a setting and blah, blah, blah. And now we're being told that that's what's going to happen. I hope that things can be that smooth. I think the truth of it is, as the people who are usually the ones having to figure out how to fix what happened that wasn't intended to happen, I'm with St. Myers of like, how the fuck are we going to find people to hire? Like, people were not learning this shit to begin with. How am I going to find somebody who just, you know, and we're going to find a way, but like, it's the systems are not they're not helping us, right? Even as like hiring managers, none of this shit makes, like, how do I hire, like, for people to go to a position that's going to be what in 3 years?
I got two questions. One is for Costin. How are you thinking about, like, you have a teenage daughter? How are you thinking about the world that when she joins the working world? Do you feel like this conversation is relevant to what she will be dealing with? Like, what is your thinking there around critical thinking and abilities? One, and two, he who has the most electricity at the end of the day wins this. Aren't we creating kind of like this global haves and have-nots, where the ability to do things is going to be limited to the people who have the most tokens, and people in Guyana with no concept of tokens or electricity left behind? Like, how are we thinking about that?
I think it always goes back to the purpose of life, and like feeling self-accomplished, and what do you want to do in life. And I think that AI will change a lot about how people think about work. And in the end, it all breaks down to one very simple concept, which I believe is choice. As they say in Matrix, everything begins with choice. I think that in the future, humans will fight to retain the choice, and AI will fight to provide the illusion of choice. And this struggle between maintaining the choice and providing the illusion of choice to people, I think, will be the biggest struggle of the next 50 years. And what you need to teach people, and I think that this is probably the thing that we need to hang on to, is keeping the choice, keeping ourselves in charge, and avoiding outsourcing the choice to machines. As long as you can say, give me 5 notepads and let me choose which one I like the most, as opposed to give me the best notepad that I can use for this task, I think things will be more or less okay. And you can reapply this and generalize this idea to any concept. Just drive, for instance, driving, right? You can argue that you won't need a driving license anymore. There'll be like cabs driving around, and you'll just call a cab, and the cab will take you from your place to another place for almost nothing or for free. Like,
if you live in San Francisco or Phoenix today, in Scottsdale, you can do that with these self-driving Waymos anyway. This is already here.
Right, so nobody needs to learn to drive anymore, correct? You don't need like this skill anymore. Although some people may say, I love driving. Like, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a driver. So put me in charge and let me drive something somewhere, okay? And that's fine. I believe that it's fine to have the choice for you to take control. I think it's wrong to produce a technology that does not give you control. So if there's a taxi without a steering wheel, if there's like a taxi that has absolutely no controls on the inside, that's wrong. Still, choice remains the most important factor. And keep in mind that the illusion of choice will be probably fed, down your throat from now on, like, you don't need to think about it. Like, the AI will take care of it. We will produce whatever you need. Just don't worry about it. We'll take care of that. So the moment you hear we'll take care of that, I think that's when things starts to collapse, and it's very easy to go down this road and lose control. And yeah, sooner or later, the more I think about Matrix, which is, probably one of the greatest movies, and it's been from so many points of view, it kind of predicted a lot of things. And the more I think about it, the Wachowskis were geniuses when they created Matrix, and I don't know what went in there, or like how they came up with all that, but again, I think it all breaks down to choice. We need to keep control. We need to maintain the choice. We need to be able to choose between different options. And when we don't like something, we need to be able to throw it away. So if I don't want to go through the robo-taxi that has no wheels, I want to be able to drive my own car. But, it's coming. Probably one day will come when you will not be allowed to drive your own car because it's dangerous. And
before you go, Juanito,
too dangerous to do that. And I'm finished.
Let me just share a quick anecdote. When I was out in San Francisco for Nebula Fog, I shared a Waymo with Oscar Salazar from Bishop Fox. He was out there with me, and we were chit-chatting in a Waymo on the way to Nebula Fog in the morning about this future where no one needs to learn to drive. All the roads are going to have sensors. The cars are going to be talking to each other, blah, blah, blah. And I said, some throwaway, years from now, we're going to be in this world. And he says, what the fuck are you talking about? He has one of these self-driving, the modern Teslas that self-drive, address to address. It does the full self-driving. He says he came to San Francisco with his family, with his kids, his young kids, and they went into a Waymo. And where there was this notion of everyone is taking out their phone to do this. Oh my God, look at my car. The kids were unimpressed, completely unimpressed by this self-driving taxi that's taking them around San Francisco. The point is, they're so used to their Tesla at home that this is the new norm, and it's already here. It's 2026. We're not talking 50 years from now. This is like, it's moving so fast and so dramatically that it boggles your mind. Sorry, Juan, go.
Remember, one day will come when it will be legal for you to drive a car.
Well,
because it's too dangerous.
That's what I wanted to say.
It will be illegal.
Illegal.
Yeah. Let me kind of push that in a maybe, like, let's chew on that for a little bit, because I love driving. You guys know I love driving. So I'm not here arguing that I don't want to be able to drive. But it is the most dangerous thing human beings do in their lives on a daily basis. It's
fair.
Drastically, statistically much more dangerous than flying, and frankly, knowing some of you people and how you drive. I mean, it's fucking terrifying. Like, if you don't believe in God after getting off the highway, like, there's something wrong with you. You're not thinking about your life, because around you are people whom at any moment can have a heart attack, who barely studied for a driving test they took 30 fucking years ago. One of them forgot their glasses. Right, like they're on their
phone texting.
They're fucking texting, right? Like, so the truth is that it's a miracle that any of us make it anywhere at any given fucking time. And I'm not advocating for this, but let me put it a little differently, right? If you were a civil planner and you looked at a modern city with the density of a New York or San Francisco or whatever, and you go, look, traffic is a compression problem. A lot of the time, there isn't even a clear source of traffic. Like, it isn't like shit, like a car broke down in the highway and that's why we're here for 3 hours. A lot of the time, it's like this weird compression problem where it's like, well, most people in the US never learn how to drive stick shift. We're all driving automatic cars, which means like accelerate and stop means red lights, and the person behind you at a variable rate has to stop as well, and you get these weird emergent behaviors where there's no reason for this to take an hour and a half. It's technically a 30-minute drive, but because of the amount of people, the amount of cars, the amount of whatever, and the disorganization and the lack of fluidity and unity and even like procedural symmetry, we have traffic. And someone shows up and goes, hey, how about we put a bunch of self-driving cars that are all using clean energy and are owned by, let's say, the city. Let's get past some of the complexities here, but let's envision this scenario where you go, it's free for anyone in this city to go wherever the fuck they want with a given SLA, but no one can own cars. And the way that it works is that self-driving is incredibly perfect and safe as long as every car on the road is self-driving, right? Like there's uniformity. They communicate with each other. You know where the other cars are. You know when there's something broken down. It's all on the same network. So they tell you, we can solve this problem so there's no more traffic. Nobody has to own cars. No one's burning gas in this city anymore. And it's free to everybody. But it's all or nothing, right? Like it's all self-driving cars and utopia or none. And I'm putting it this way because that's the kind of Faustian bargain that the economy kind of forces on you. You go, yeah, it's not that we wanted to stop driving, but like shit, Waymos are everywhere and they're so cheap and and parking is so expensive and gas is so expensive that like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to own a car. And you end up in a similar scenario.
Just to look back
are
to
you
St.
saying
Myers.
that through technology and AI, we will finally reach and implement the ideals of communism?
This is what I heard. This is exactly what I heard when he said everyone is going to drive for free. I'm like, who is this guy?
Look, I'm not a communist, but what I will say is that Marx, among the many failings of Marx and sort of like mooching nonsense ideology,
one of the things closer to that mic so I can get to clip it properly. Say about Marx
one of the
again.
things I would point to as the failures of it is that, like, long before selling out, Marx was selling this notion that thesis on Feuerbach. Marx starts with this inverted model of dialectical material, like of dialectic that's flipped upside down, which is, Hegel used to think that the spirit unfolds, concepts unfold from the top down, right? The culture and the times, the spirit of the times reaches a certain point where, you know, it's the time for an idea, like AI, to percolate and just like appears top down. Marx says that's nonsense. It works the other way around. You know, you flip it on its head. The material conditions are the ones that are going to change how the world works. And that's how that thesis goes. He's thinking about industrialization, for example, right? Like he's thinking about, you know, there's factories now and therefore, you know, labor doesn't look the way that it looked before. And that's what's going to change things. I believe that the reality is somewhere in between the two. And I think that even the changes in material conditions come from an unfolding of culture. That's how we get to robotics. That's how we get to AI. Suddenly appears and now it's everywhere. The reason I'm pitching about Marx is most of the early Marx is built on this idea that, like, he kind of sees industrialization as like having already, like, the factory model is kind of like, oh, we've done it. We've now made it possible to create things at a rate that's like greater than what a human could do by themselves. So that surplus capacity means that there is such a thing as communism possible, which is we can make so much surplus already that why wouldn't you own the factories and why wouldn't everybody get everything out of them? Idiotically oversimplistic, but also, you know, centuries too early. Now I ask you, again, I keep going back to the early Marx because the early Marx had a notion of global communism, that like the world it wouldn't make sense to have private property anymore because the material conditions of the world imply that there's so much surplus that why would you keep it from people? And that didn't make any fucking sense back then. But if you are bringing me to this reality where what you tell me is, oh my God, robotics and AI mean that there's so much surplus capacity, so much surplus labor, so much surplus production that, like, you know, it's not that we don't want to employ you. It's not that we don't want you to do well, but it doesn't make sense for you to do any of this. Like the machines just do themselves. And I go, that sounds an awful lot like what we were discussing back in those days about like, there's a very legitimate question that we need to try again at that shouldn't be reduced into communism or whatever the fuck it is we've got right now, which is, what do you do when there's too much surplus? What do you do when your throughput is so high that it just doesn't, what do you do when manufacturing does not need to be globally distributed? Because I can 3D print half of the shit that I need, and the other half, I can go to like a local factory like 30 minutes away and get the rest of the stuff I need. So why are we making things in China, loading them into ships, shipping them all the way here with no sense of how much of it is needed? Right? There's a lot of things that suddenly don't make any fucking sense. But we just, we don't have time to think about that kind of stuff.
Costin, somebody paid attention in political science class.
It starts with the basic universal income, right? And then you lose reproduction rights. Like, you can have the basic income, but like you're not allowed to have any offsprings. And this is like, I think, how some interesting utopia gets birthed. And I'm a bit worried.
I'm thinking about it being illegal to drive a car in a future of fully self-driving cars. And I come back to St. Myers' piece. Is it good because you're always going to have that outlier who learned something, and you're going to have an organization or a workplace where who is that motherfucker over there thinking critically, right? It's going to be illegal to think critically in an organization when everyone is just like automated on like robot without brains. I don't know. The future looks dark. It's pretty dark to me.
Still goes back into the same issue, which is energy and wars over energy. And I mean, if we can solve the energy problem, we'll live happily with bananas and avocados and everything.
Costin, what you may remember that I think most folks have either forgotten or, as of my generation, never learned, is that like the Cold War and many of these wars were about energy to begin with. Right? Like there was if you go back to like the early Iron Man comics and you go back to some of the early depictions of the Cold War, we used to talk about like nuclear power as this thing that would unshackle us from the conditions that create all the pains of the world. Right? Like there was this notion of like, oh, maybe nuclear fission is going to be the thing that means that power is now so cheap and ubiquitous that we don't need to go get oil from somebody. We don't need to go do this, that, and the other. There were these very utopian notions around what we could do, and they were mostly around electricity generation, power generation. Like we have not moved an inch from that. Like there's obviously new conditions and new things, but like there's also this way of viewing the 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, as this kind of like bureaucratic slowdown where we could see the promises of technology, but they weren't quite here. And we all kind of busied ourselves with pushing papers for a few decades to slow down and be like, well, what do we really want to do here? Because like nuclear energy, we could have had nuclear energy for everything. Like most of the lack of adoption of nuclear energy was not really about the technology not working. It was about like, yeah, we don't like it. Not in my backyard. We're scared of it, right? Like, and sure, valid. But it like on some Vaclav Smil version of, looking at the development of history through energy production, we kind of just decided to pause for a little bit. And now we're in this point of desperation where you're like, can we draw, if I could suck energy out of the fucking walls, like I would crush them with my bare fucking hands because we need all that we can produce. So it feels like history is just like catching up with us.
Before we close this show, let's get to the news.
Did we go through any fucking stories?
No,
bro?
that's the thing.
What the fuck have we even been talking about?
I wanted to point out, before we close the show, I want to point out the two things, which is significant in terms of what we've been discussing on this show. In response to Dark Sword, Apple is now backporting all these patches to iOS 18. they announced this week, Andy Greenberg has a piece, there's a bunch of articles out on Apple saying it will enable iOS 18 specific fixes for millions of iPhone users who remain on iOS rather than force them to update to iOS 26. This is a departure for them. It's very, very, very rare that they'll do this. Do you think that this is a one-off? Or do you think this is a significant kind of like acknowledgement, admission from Apple that it's moved beyond extremely targeted to the masses, or this is just responding to a lot of the publicity and reporting on Dark Sword / Corona?
I think pressure helps, and we see the effect of the pressure and the people who are complaining about this, that it gets the patch, because you know what happens if it doesn't get the patch. You will have a huge problem with infections, many infections. Like, this is no longer one of those may have been exploited in limited attacks. And the reason you know it's not that is because there's like nothing about it coming from Apple's side. If it was like very limited, they would say something. If it's huge and like the exploitation is massive, there is nothing coming from that side. So it kind of suggests that there is a massive problem brewing, and it's in their advantage to push that. Personally, I have no problem with the liquid glass. I don't think that it's true issue. However, there is older hardware that cannot run it. Yeah, there is older hardware which works very well, and some people just don't feel the need to update. And you know that a lot of
I
these
thought that was
updates,
a really stupid thing in the article of like, oh yeah, they're not upgrading because of liquid glass.
I don't think anyone is
doing. Who the fuck is that informed about what the update includes? Like, no, you can't.
Right. So my advice is to update. Of course, update to iOS 26 if you can. If you can't, update to the newly available patch from Apple for iOS 18. And
if you're on iOS 15, you're fucked forever. You're never going to get those patches. And I don't think you can either, right? I think there's like a technical hardware limitation to moving from iOS 15 to even 18. I'm not sure.
I do have like an iPhone X, which is stuck to iOS 16 actually, but that actually got patches. So I did get an update for that iOS 16, and I haven't seen updates in years. And finally, there was a new update for that iOS 16.
I mean, I would love to see it. Yeah,
you are back.
I was going to say I would love to see it if they're going to start doing this like more regularly. It's not like an easy thing, right? Like you're committing yourself to a shit ton of work if you have to keep backporting patches for everything. I understand why they wouldn't want to do it. But
massive resource and cost to like backport to every
it's a lot of work. Yeah. What bothers me though, the reason that I kind of want to see them keep at it is more that it would signal that Apple is taking it more seriously to be on top of the vulnerabilities affecting the ecosystem, that they want to be more on top of like what is actually affecting people and what are they running into in the wild, which is kind of what we've been begging for with the whole threat intel thing. Like the reason we keep saying, hey, Apple has never done threat intel well. They clearly, they show that they're, don't really know what the fuck they're doing in some ways. But a big part of it is a willful ignorance. Like you had the idea of like the reality in the wild, that was always a second or third order problem. The first order problem was, well, how do you make it technologically harder, more expensive, impossible, whatever, to have these things affect the latest device? And that was their big thing. And I think it's great, and it's why you get this like always better mentality, the sort of like Protestant work ethic approach to security. But, on the other hand, the fact that their commitment stops there is pretty fucked up, right? Like that's where you go, well, I mean, I'm only being protected by Apple to the extent that I am on the latest and greatest, not just like of the update, but like of the hardware, of the whatever, right? And anything below that, you're on your own, kids. And like to the point where we're not even trying, we're not even looking. And that was part of the discussion with this Corona Dark Sword thing. Is like once you get the second one pop off and you go, guys, like what we're seeing is the long tail. Like it's becoming obvious that clearly there have been exploit kits being sold that were targeting not the latest iOS, but an iOS of however many versions ago, and that still matters, but we've been kind of led to think that that isn't a thing. That it doesn't matter as long as they're not ODes. As long as there's a patch, you're fine. And like, it's ignoring, what was it in this case? 25% of iOS users? Like, that's not a small number. That's not an IDGAF number.
Yeah, and they know it. I mean, that's the reason why you see this backporting and the cost incurred with doing this. I want to also flag, staying with iOS, WhatsApp actually alerted 200, just 200 users, mostly in Italy, that they had been tricked into installing a fake version of WhatsApp laced with spyware, and they outed an Italian spyware company called Asigint, Asigint, which is related to this SIO company. Have you heard of these folks before, Costin?
There was an article last year in December talking a bit about SIO being behind these malicious Android apps that masqueraded as WhatsApp, kind of the poor man's spyware solution, because like in the modern environments, unless you have exploits and other means to deploy your spyware, you can still resort to these kind of old school techniques where you fool someone into installing a different version of a messenger. And by the way, this has been quite popular in other places like Russia, like Turkey, like Iran, where the regime, by blocking, let's say, the official channels, they kind of force people into other app stores, like alternative app stores, where they download these Trojanized lookalike versions. Of course, I haven't seen any IOCs related to this new WhatsApp lookalike version, so I haven't seen any. So I wonder how it was getting installed. Was it getting installed from the Apple App Store and they removed it from there, or was it getting installed through some or another mechanism? Not necessarily jailbroken, but like in the European Union, of course, because of European Union regulations, now it is possible to have alternate app stores.
App stores, right.
So through these alternate app stores, you can install theoretically other things, because Europe and freedom and the pursuit of happiness and the attached caps. So I haven't seen the IOCs for that. I think it would be interesting to look at those. And I still wonder what's going on with Italy, that they still have all these spyware companies, brewing there like mushrooms. So what's going on with Italy?
There's a lot of them. I mean, there are some of the public reporting by some Italian publications talks about this SIO is one of tons of surveillance companies. There's Cyphergate, eServe, GR Sistemi, NEG, Raxir, RCS Lab. I mean, is there hacking something in the water there, Juanito? Hacking team?
I mean, it's always kind of been like that, right? Like, we got Cali out of there too, right? Like, Milan in itself was like a hotbed of this. And you hear that about Barcelona now as well. I don't know.
What were the two Occhioneri brothers, if you remember that story? What was iPyramid?
Oh,
that was like another spyware scandal.
Yeah, yeah, I remember
coming out of Italy.
Yeah.
We got to close the show. So we'll close the show with the biggest story this week, the big explosive story this week. We've hinted at it during the conversations earlier, and I want us to spend a few minutes on this because there's a blue North Korea angle here. This Axios NPM package hijack, 83 million plus weekly downloads hijacked on March 31st. An attacker compromised the NPM account of the lead maintainer, this guy called Jason Seaman. I think he published a post-mortem on how he was social engineered. But basically, social engineered him, took over, and then pushed these malicious versions. Costin, I don't follow this NPM ecosystem very closely. What is this Axios?
What is this Axios? I don't follow. Well, I pride myself in not using this ecosystem either too much. And to be honest, I never used Axios myself. Like, well, I'm sure a lot of people out there are using it and they like it and they think it's the only way. And they said, like, how can you live without using? But I just didn't feel the need to go into that direction. But I'm also very important, not a developer. But from purely from a security point of view, I think this week has been crazy, and the amount of supply chain attack stories has been exploding. And remember, we've been warning people about supply chain attacks, and truth be told, there have been serious supply chain attacks in the past. If you remember, maybe SolarWinds or the more recent story with what was it, Snowflake. Like the supply chain attacks can have like different shapes, and it can happen like at different levels. And there have been, let's say, a lot of solutions being pitched like they can handle supply chain attacks, but the reality is that no one was truly worried about any of this stuff. It says, yeah, sure, there's a supply chain with SolarWinds, but I don't use SolarWinds, so I don't need to worry about it. And then like the next day there's a supply chain attack with that thing, but I don't use it, so I don't need to worry about it. So it's kind of limited into that sphere. And I have a feeling that with these code generation factories, and with everyone embracing the AI code generation movement, we're gonna see more and more of these stories. Like, to me, it was really funny last week when we saw Andrei Karpathy, being panicked all over, like supply chain attacks. Team PSP was last week big in the news. This week, this Axios package in particular, that some people initially thought it's this Team PSP again, PCP again. It turns out that was not as related to North Korea. And now attribution, people maybe not necessarily agree 100% who is behind it. Is it like Lazarus, or is it the Blue North subgroup of Lazarus? I saw that Google published an interesting analysis where they decided to link to a new financially motivated North Korean group. The reality is that there are so many of these North Korean operations at the moment that it's like really difficult to distinguish them one from another. And I would love, of course, for sure to hear what our good friend Seong-Soo Park thinks about it, him being one of the world's top experts in North Korea malware.
There's no doubt that there was a North Korean nexus here, though.
Yeah, because
we can quibble about the subgroups.
Correct, because there's overlaps, right? There's overlaps with older North Korea connected operations. And also, like there's a kind of this crypto angle here, which again kind of fits into Lazarus subgroups, well documented focus before. So it's interesting. And I think that the more people start using AI to code their own tools and like to brew stuff, we're gonna see more and more these stories, and it won't be just SolarWinds that affects my neighbor, but not me because I'm not there. But like Jax was saying, when you do a brew update and you see like all the dependencies and everything coming in, like it's the floodgates are suddenly open, and the potential to get something is growing tenfold.
No surprise to see the North Koreans interested in this part of the ecosystem, right? This kind of fits perfectly with what they want to do. Target developers, get some identities, figure out a way to do some crypto theft. And I'm pretty sure it's probably, specific. There are probably some crypto banks and some of these crypto exchanges and so on that could fall victim to this. So.
Yeah, and what worries me is this like never-ending snowballing of supply chain attacks. Like Team PSP, they come, they steal, 300 million credentials, and those lead to another wave of supply chain attacks, and they steal another 300, and that leads to the next. And this seems to be the never-ending new reality of supply chain attacks at the source code level. That was going on and will probably go on for years.
How do you defend against this? You're a CISO at a big organization and you're like, okay, the floodgates are open. It's dependency upon dependency. It's being chained down the line. Cisco, I saw reporting of Cisco losing source code. I saw like some crazy like follow-on connections. If you're like, how do you defend against this?
I mean, there's some solutions that already try to do this. Like I think Sneak and like a couple of other, shops like try to maybe nudge over with Jaime. Like they're trying to manage sort of the dependency sprawl. The truth is that these things are going to be used. Like they need to be used for a lot of use cases in general, a lot of development, and people are just going to do it. So the way I see it is if you're in an enterprise setting and you need to manage this, I don't see a way where you just say, well, you can't use this. You're just asking for trouble. You're asking people to circumvent you. That's just not a viable thing. So the next thing is whether you get a solution to do this for you or you try to develop it yourself now that things are a little easier to develop, I feel like you need to have a proxy. You need to have a way to say, hey, you can all have the packages you want for development and for whatever, all these stupid tools in the meantime, but it needs to be installed from this repository that the company maintains and that at least standardizes this soak period that they were discussing, right? Like part of the issue here is not so much that somebody can push a malicious dependency, but also that like everyone will pull it opportunistically the minute that it's out and no one has a chance to check and nobody has a chance to verify. Look, the whole model's broken. I refer you to the beginning of this conversation, right? Like I'm not saying that this is like a tractable thing and that this is how we should go moving forward, but addressing the reality we live in today, you need to have some way to manage like dependency sprawl. You need to have some way to enforce mechanisms for where things are coming from and how long it takes before you push. And essentially, if you are developing things, like even just like pinning to versions will just, part of that might mean that you have certain vulnerabilities that go downstream. It's not easy, but a certain amount of checking of like what dependencies it is you're bringing in, how much of those are just typo squatted, or are they the standard ones or the right ones? Like, it fucking sucks. The surface of this whole thing fucking sucks. But again, that is the reality. That is the porous underbelly that we're all working with. So if you don't like it, pretending it's not there is not changing shit.
I really like this project that Elastic released where they actually use an LLM to diff the patches. I thought that was interesting. I was wondering personally like how good LLMs would be at actually finding something and what happens when people actually try to bypass that, like where it's the old cat and mouse game, but right now we are trying to bypass the LLM detection. But I thought it was a really interesting idea and a really interesting project by the supply chain monitor from Elastic as a potential solution.
Shout out to Joe DeSimone. Joe actually wrote a blog post on how he used, he kind of homebrewed an AI-powered supply chain monitor in an afternoon, like on the way back from RSA the weekend. And then by Monday, he had a ping that generated a Slack message, and there he was. He discovered some one of these big things just by, homebrewing something. They actually released it, automated monitoring for top PIPE and NPM packages for supply chain compromises. The tool polls both registries for new releases, diffs each release against its predecessor, and uses an LLM by cursor to classify diffs as benign or malicious, and malicious findings immediately trigger a Slack alert. So pretty cool.
Mind you, the luck that comes with this person randomly putting this together and randomly setting them up and thankfully checking the diff. And I remind you that, the day before this dude did this thing, because he was zonked out on RSA, on a bad RSA hangover, where the fuck was everybody else? Like, somebody maintains this package manager, presumably. And like, there's just so many people asleep at the wheel when it comes to these fucking things. And they're being used everywhere. Everyone's computers.
It's unfixable. I mean,
well, if nobody owns it, then yeah, there's no fixing it. But I think a big part of it is also like, why does nobody own these things?
No, what I mean, the entire supply chain ecosystem and these dependencies, like that thing, that is unfixable. You're just living in that world.
Yeah, it must suck.
Forever.
Like forever, unless you're willing to change it, So how would you
go back to the beginning of this podcast and listen to the show all over again.
Start over. Start the episode over. Yeah.
Start the episode over.
David Lynch moment. You're gonna splice the podcast so that it, Mulholland drives itself.
All right, that's our show for this week. Costin, you got any shout outs? Any closing thoughts?
Shout outs to our good friend Mark Arena from Arsenal Forensics. I haven't seen him in a long while, but I've been using some of his tools recently for these forensic investigations, and he has some really amazing things such as tools to parse Windows,
Mark
swap files.
Spencer.
Mark Spencer. Did I say Mark Arena? I apologize. That's a different Mark.
It took me a second. I was like, different Mark.
I said Mark. I apologize for that. But shout outs to Mark Arena as well.
Mark Spencer and his tools are awesome. I mean, that guy does amazing
shout
work.
Outs to Mark Spencer from Arsenal, who makes some amazing tools. To feel free to check out their website, and the stories they published are just mind blowing.
Is there something new?
There is a new tool from him that decompresses Windows swap files. Microsoft added a lot of features to Windows under the hood that many people are not aware, in all sorts of places. And one of them is memory compression to make Windows more efficient, running with low memory. And there's many other things. NTFS deduplication. And Mark has a new tool that allows you to fully decompress all these swap file blocks for forensics purposes, which helps a lot when you do investigations.
Excellent. Juanito, close the show with some shout outs. You get the last word.
And I don't have anything to shout out. There's, the
usual.
There's the usual, right?
And then Jax comes and has 30 names to shout out.
Yeah. Let me get my list over here.
Let me think about it. Let me unroll this scroll. No, I mean, shout out to the AI Sommelier Society people coming through this weekend. We've got a couple of meetings, and we're gonna do some interesting things, and hopefully I'll push out a paper with some of the things we were just discussing.
Push St. Meyer's essay into the middle of the table too.
I mean, yeah, St. Myers did great with that. I actually, shout out to CyberDad. I'm glad he put that out there. It was amazing how he was really second guessing whether to push it or not, and I'm glad he got it out there. He's got a couple more episodes to that. There's multiple pieces, so I'm hoping that this means he'll want to push more of that out. I think it's important to have that kind of contrarian view to some degree as well, right? We've been joking, we're old man yells at token factory is sort of the new meme, and I'm glad for it to be represented sort of in its own light. So, we can hopefully serve as a place that entertains both, right? You've got your Gabes, and then you've got your St. Myerses, and they're both equally important views that we need to kind of keep in our heads at all times. And with that mentality, I'll also say there are no gods here. There is no, nothing is sacred. Take the time to reconsider how things should work. I remind you that this thing that you're so concerned about possibly losing, this present that you are so sad is being changed. I remind you that you fucking hated it in the first place. You never liked it. You never thought it made sense. So if everybody's already going to tear everything down, why don't you consider what it is that you would like to see? And maybe we can build that instead.
That's a great way to end the show.
Beautiful.
Have a great Easter weekend, everyone, except for those in Romania who has to wait another week.
No, you can wish us happy Easter. Thank you.
Happy Easter, my friend.
And happy Easter also to everyone else who celebrates it this weekend.